Welcome again to another rendition of WTF Interviews. My name is Sir Royce Briales, and I'm with my prestigious co-host, Dr. Raheem Young. How's it going, brother?
I'm doing well, man. How things on your end?
Ah, man, pretty good, man. The Bulls almost in first place, man. I'm excited for this season, man. They're kicking butt for the first time in a while, bro.
Yeah.
I'm also pleased to announce we have a special guest, James Holly Jr. How's it going, brother?
I'm good. Appreciate you saying the junior. I'm glad to
Yeah, I
be
gotta
here.
say that, man. That's the whole
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, first question for you, James. What do you do for a purpose or for a living? And how many kids you got, and what are their ages?
So I'm a assistant professor at the University of Michigan in the mechanical engineering department. Um, so that means I do research on, I guess to put it simply, my research looks at how Black intellectualism can help people rethink what engineering is, what mechanical engineering is, and how to use it and how to serve people by affirming Black values, Black identity, Black intellectualism. And then I teach courses, mentor students, and things like that. I have two daughters. One is age 2, she'll be 3 in January, and then the other is 4, and she'll be 5 in December, so a month from now.
All right, cool. So what made you get into like engineering? Like why'd you go get onto that field?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not one that I wasn't one of the types who like, oh, when I was younger, I take a stuff apart and put it back together, taking apart the lawnmower and nothing like that. Really, I participated in a program called DAPSEP, Detroit Area Pre-College Engineering Program. My mom wanted me to be engaged in different educational experiences. And between that program and then just liking math and science in school, was encouraged to explore engineering. Generally, if you like math and science, that's kind of a typical route to go. People suggest you look into engineering. And so when I was going to college, I know I wanted to go to a Black college. And I just looked up what schools were known for engineering or had a reputable program in engineering. Ended up going to Tuskegee University. And so when I was studying it there, the curriculum, the classes were interesting to me. They were mentally stimulating, but I didn't necessarily feel as if I was passionate or about engineering as if I saw it as a career trajectory. And so I had a faculty member who saw a lot of promise in me, encouraged me to get a PhD. And so that would make me explore graduate school. And so that's really how I stayed in because at that point I was like, I made it through engineering. I graduated with that degree. And I was interested in youth development, particularly urban youth, like in the city of Detroit. And engineering typically is not, it doesn't, how should I say, it doesn't serve the needs of Black people in urban spaces, right?
Mm.
So how engineering is conceived tends to be exclusive. It tends to suggest that we have something intellectually deficient about us and how people teach it and how people treat us within engineering. And also the purposes of engineering, you know, even though engineering was caused to disrupt our communities and enact racism, is
Mm.
not used to correct those issues. And so I saw the opportunity to reframe engineering, reconceptualize how engineering can be useful. And that's really why I serve in the role that I do.
Oh, that's cool. Can you talk about like earlier you spoke on like Black intellectualism? Can you talk about how Black intellectualism contributed to America?
Yeah. So, I think when I say Black intellectualism, folks I think about are like W.E.B. Du Bois, Cornell West, more
Mm.
contemporary folks, Amiri Baraka, Audre Lorde, Bell Hooks, Angela Davis, James Baldwin. Um, I would even throw in some folks that we may not think as Black thinkers, more so as activists, but they still are like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.,
Yeah.
Stokely Carmichael, or Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely. Like all of these, there's so many Black folks who articulated that the promises of America are false. The ideals of America are mythic, but in particular, they affirm the ways that Black people have navigated society and created alternative ways of living despite this
Mm.
oppressive social structure. And so, some of the ways like W.E.B. Du Bois talks about double consciousness. And he says there's this dueling consciousness, like mental state that we have where we know that we Black, And to be Black is to not really be American, right? And I think nowadays people may find it hard to understand because you think like I was born here, I was raised here, I'm an American. Like, I have my citizenship, my nationality is American. But what he's talking about is when they were creating this country and how they think about whose value, who has dignity. Typically, people are designing and thinking and making decisions for white people.
Mm-hmm.
And so he talks about like being aware of this fact that like your dignity is always undermined as a Black person. Your humanity, these institutions, political institutions, economic institutions, dehumanize you. They make life difficult and survival. You focus more so on surviving than being well. And so that framework is helpful so that we don't, in terms of how it shaped America, I think it brings a consciousness in terms of like, maybe not conscious is the right word, but just it's a measuring stick of like, is America true to what it claims to be?
Yeah.
This idea of freedom, idea of liberty, these are ideals that they like to espouse, but Black intellectuals show that those things are not only fake, but they're also like the opposite is reality. They're the antithesis of what our reality truly is. And so but that's a harsh reality. And so a lot of times people don't want to really deal with that, reckon with it. And so I use them to help inform how I encourage students to think about our existence.
That's cool. I think it is a
Actually,
conscious.
I got one more. My bad.
Like,
Mary Baraka, my bad. And Gil Scott Heron is another. But Gil Scott Heron has a song called
yeah,
he got y'all familiar with the song Whitey on the Moon?
yeah.
Right. So I think of him, I think of Mary Baraka. Mary Baraka has this one quote where he's talking about like technology absorbs or manifests the spirit of the creator or the perspective of the creator. So a lot of times people say, well, technology is unbiased or things like that. And so he talks about how what we create is emblematic of who we are. Like it reproduces who we are as the creators. And I talk about those two in terms of Whitey on the Moon because we look at scenarios where, you know, Jeff Bezos, and, you know, taking folks on field trips to the moon while you got in Benton Harbor, Michigan, you got a water crisis. In Flint, Michigan, you got a water crisis. In Detroit, you got all type of crises in various areas. So all these Black cities, people are struggling to live, and yet you have folks who are looking to live somewhere else in a different aspect of the universe. So Black folks, again, expose those inconsistencies and disparities between how our humanity is not viewed as valid.
Yeah. So speak on your thoughts on raising children in this type of world. Like how have you used your experience with engineering with education at home with the kids?
Yeah. So one is like I have behind me various books that affirm Black identity and Black intellectualism. One of my favorites is this one over my right shoulder, The Undefeated. And it's a poem by Kwame Alexander that really walks through Black history from chattel slavery and how our ancestors were kidnapped and brought over here. But then he talks about the ways that we've excelled and still made various accomplishments. And it's not, you know, he talks about athletes, he talks about writers and thinkers, he talks about, you know, musicians. And to me, not to me, but one of the ways that I've tried to use this for my girls is it's this constant tension, right? Like I don't want to discourage them where they feel like, oh man, there's nothing I can do. Like America been lying to me, you know, Black folks still in this bad spot. There's nothing like why. I don't want them to fall into nihilism. But I also don't want them to only focus on the positive aspects of who they are and what has built them as Black folks and the richness of our culture and identity, and not reckon with this rough reality that we're still in this. Right? Like all these people did these great things. You have all these great thinkers and contributors, but yet even in 2021, we still have tremendous disparities in terms of housing, wellness, mental wellness, psychological wellness, you know, wealth stratification. So I try to go back and forth. I don't say if I balance it, but I try to go back and forth between elevating the beauty of their identity, how they look, and who they are, and the contributions to them, and then also spirituality, and while also talking about some of the harsh realities that we had to navigate. So one is books. The other is verbally affirming them. They're like currently they're 4 and 2, but I talk to them like you're black. You're black and beautiful. That person is white. That person is brown, whatever. To help them also be aware that even though race is not biological, it has tangible influences on our lived reality. And so helping them to build a consciousness to that early on. So again, they're not caught off guard, and rather they can counteract those things more directly. And then the other part is praying, honestly, because there's a lot of fear with having 2 black girls, knowing how black women are devalued even to a worse extent than black men in society, right? Like black women are heavily objectified and their bodies are commodified. And so, people feel as if they can do whatever they want to black girls. And so, there's my fears cause me to pray often on their behalf that they won't have to navigate some of the atrocities that many black women have.
Do you find it hard, like working in higher education, navigating that space and also maintaining like your identity?
Yes, yes, yes. My identity and my roles and responsibilities as a father, to frame it in context of this conversation. So I said I'm assistant professor, and what that means is I'm classified as being on what's called the tenure track. I don't know if y'all are familiar with tenure, but it's the idea that after working the job about 5 or 6 years, maybe 7 years, you put together a portfolio of all what you've done, the teaching, the research you've done, grants that you've won, and then there's a committee that will evaluate whether or not you deserve to be promoted. And if you get promoted, it's job security, meaning it's hard to fire you essentially. You can speak the way you want to speak. You can do really even some very improper things, almost except anything. But I mean, you can do pretty much anything but kill somebody. Basically, once you get tenure, it's a very secure classification. But what it means is for those 5 or 6 years, you have to be deeply dedicated to spending the majority of your time writing journals so that they can be published, writing grants so that you can bring in money for the institution, engaging in various service capacities, whatever. So what that means is I'm constantly juggling these things. And like you say, for one, is me. So I'm a black man. Is very few, relatively speaking, the number of black men with PhDs in engineering is very small, but even more so, the number of black faculty in engineering programs is very small. So, but also I do race scholarship. So I'm not only black, but I focus on race and racism and anti-blackness in particular. So how people view me and my intellectual capabilities is often from a deficit standpoint. Like I don't deserve to be there. I'm not smart enough, or I'm talking about this soft stuff that's not really related to the core aspects of engineering. So I'm always dealing with those social pressures and the type of various conversations and expectations. But then as it relates to my girls, is a lot of times trying to navigate when can I work? Do I have, trying to make sure I retain mental space to interact with them, play with them, and just stay attuned to their growth and development. And so it's very hard because the job is stressful, but it also takes up a lot of time. So if I'm not willing to get up early in the morning or stay up late, then I take away time during the day from interacting with my daughters and my wife, just as a father, but as a husband. And so yeah, this is very hard. It's very, very hard. With my oldest, who's 5, I tell a lot of people, I'm like, I didn't feel like I was really ready to be a parent until 2 years ago. The first 3 years, I was just dragging along. It was God's grace. Whatever she turned out to be, it was her mama and the Lord. Like, I was like, whoa, I was struggling, like just navigating the existential reality of like, I'm responsible for this human being, like this little being. So yeah, I just felt ready. Like 2 years. So the second child, she got a lot more. She got a lot better. I was able to give her more. But yeah, it's extremely hard.
That's interesting. It took you 3 years to essentially get
Yeah,
your sea
man.
legs. Yeah, yeah. It took me about a year. I was like a year into it, man, after the first one. And
Yeah, and
yeah, and the
go
second
ahead.
one, you're right, man. It's different. Like you get you know what to do already. Like, you prepare a lot more what to expect.
Would some way, like at least for me, like I was prepared in the sense like mentally, like I know there are gonna be some things I had to do. I know I had to give up some things. I know I have to spend energy and be patient. Like I know I have to better control my emotions and my mental state. So the 3 years wasn't necessarily that. But what I mean by that is not that I wasn't managing my duties, but it was just like my decision making mechanisms. Like, am I prioritizing my wife, daughter, or am I prioritizing the job? Am I prioritizing me? And it took me a while to rework that. I was trying to make them all work. It's just
Yeah,
like you can't, like they're not equal. And it took me a while to kind of move myself to the back, de-emphasize the job, and to say like, this is she needs me to be present in these ways.
yeah.
You know,
I think I compare it to juggling. Like the more you
yeah,
juggle, the better you get at it. You know what I'm
yeah, yeah. I was dropping the ball all over the place.
saying?
That ball go. Yeah.
So what went through your mind when you found out you were having a second baby? So you got the first one, and then boom, she's pregnant again. What happened? What went through your mind when she told you that she was pregnant again?
Well, it was a little like, wow, we again, I'm still figuring out how to do it at once. So what we gonna do? And that's gonna take more energy. But on the flip side, it was what I thought was cool is that they were be close in age.
Yeah,
Right. So on one side, I'm like, for me, I was nervous and anxious about like, do we have financial capacity to deal with two? Do we have the time availability? Will we physically present emotionally and things like that? For each of them, I was excited that they will have each other because I have an older sister who's 7 years older. So we grew up together for a significant part, but then she was at the house when I was coming to be aware of things. And then my younger sister, she's 12 years younger. We didn't grow up together. So it was kind of like those dual perspectives I had. Like one, okay, it means we gotta get another car seat. We got to get a bigger stroller, more diapers. We're gonna have to change. All right, we're gonna pay for that. But on the other side, it was like, man, at least they going, they close in age and they'll be going through similar stages of life at the same time.
Can you can you talk about your relationship with your father?
Yeah. So my dad, he and my mother never married. They were dating. I think they were still together after I was born, maybe a year or so. Then they split. And then when I was growing up, I would often say I mainly was raised by my mom, um, because that's who in the house I was with. With my dad, I spent time going over his house here and there, but not like consistently or anything like that. And so I think for most of my life, now when I say most, I mean through like early 20s, it was, I mean, neither one of them really talked about their relationship. I didn't really know what happened, where things went,
Yeah.
but I was reflecting on like, it's easier not to think about it than to actually think about it. That's what I felt for most of my life. Like I'm with my mom. I grew up with my mom. That's how that's what I know. Like my dad, we hung out every
Mhm.
now and again. He'd drop some lessons. He'd show me around. Like he worked in the school system. So I go to school with him here and there. Um, but mostly a lot of times gave credit to my mom in terms of forming me as who I am. My mom and other male influencers through a church community that I grew up in, things like that. When I became older, mid 20s, and like one thing, and I began to assert myself in like my own interactions with my dad. One thing I realized like he still didn't necessarily recognize. I didn't feel he recognized my adulthood. my own
Mm-hmm.
manhood, right? So it was just like the son, but it was kind of like, I get to tell you what to do. I get to tell you, and so that's one thing I didn't appreciate. So that was a rough patch, like mid to late 20s. Then at some point I was just like, it's from a spiritual standpoint, I'm like, it is more beneficial for me, him, and my family I'm developing to, I want to say like just forgive, but like think about honoring him as, like, I mean, I'm literally a part of him. I mean, I'm a junior, right? Like that, I have his name, have so many aspects of him and who I am and how I operate. Like we both got the gift of gab. We can talk like a mug. He played basketball, I played basketball. But moving from what issues are core issues and big issues, and what issues is just like annoyances and things that happen that I can kind of deal with, get over. So I don't know if it's necessarily like fully reckoned with my childhood and growing up with my dad and how he wasn't there, and with things I felt like I'm lacking as a result of that. But I've kind of shifted in thinking about, as an adult, how can I move forward, and then thinking about the role my dad can play, and vice versa, right? Like helping him think about his own reality based on the man I've come to be. So I feel like it's like I always tried to assert myself more, but I definitely do think often about aspects that I feel like was lacking or absent in my maturation due to my relationship with my father.
Okay.
You think your relationship has matured as you become an adult, like with your dad?
Well, one is just to speak of my mind. So I think like, my dad, he when I went off to college and started studying things from an academic perspective. So it's one thing to be black, right, and know our experience. I mean, we talk anecdotally. When I say anecdote, like I got a story, you got a story, and like, man, I remember this or this happened. And there's another thing to see, okay, what has research and scholars and black intellectuals said about being black in America? And I think that what I've learned from those things, just even the people outside the academy, is folks who've written books and folks who contributed thought, the ideas I have, oftentimes I see that they are in contrast with his ideas. I think in many black homes, to honor means not to say nothing because they're the older person. They're supposed to be wiser, and you just, okay. But for me, I'm like, I'll honor this by giving you the floor to speak, and then I'm gonna speak mine, and then we gonna have an adult conversation, right? Like, just not taking. So that has certainly been a growth point. In addition to that, I think that it's matured in the sense of, and I'm not even sure whether or not this is healthy, but categorizing my expectations from what I get from him. So it's certain things I may ask for in terms of, perspective on maybe talking to somebody or something like that, but other things I just don't expect to get insight. And I think that has helped me. Again, I don't know if it's healthy, but it's helped me in our dynamics and our interactions, to reorient myself, how we relate, how we connect, and communicate.
What role do you feel like fathers play in their children's development as far as like consciously, like their outlook on the world?
Yeah, so I think that there's some type of, and I'm not speaking from a biological perspective. I'm talking pure opinion and perspective. But my thoughts, there's something innate about the expectation for a father to both like dictate and kind of, you say, lay out the land for a child, right? Like help me understand what I may engage, what I may interact with, train me in a particular perspective or orientation or disposition on how to engage these things, right? So in terms of establishing values, belief systems, in terms of establishing self-identity and self-determination. So whatever you're gonna go after, you determine what you're going after, but have something that you're going after, right? So Sir Royce was like, what do you do for work? What's your purpose or whatever? Like, I think it's still a sense of purpose often comes from the father, and then the mother nurtures that sense and builds that. But I believe the father often is the one who says, you are here for something to do. Like, so, developing work ethic and diligence. So I think there's also this aspect of discipline. In many cases, discipline is limited to physical punishment or just punitive in general. But I think about discipline in terms of correction, where if you are out of order, out of line, or you're doing something that will cause yourself harm or someone else harm, the father puts you back on track, brings you back to say, this will lead to those things. I need you to be here. This is the course that we're setting around here. These are the values and practices. You need to operate according to these things. When you are out away from me, then you have freedom to do other things. But the course I'm laying out for you is according to these particular guidelines and bounds. So that's how I think of the role of a father.
Do you feel like I guess, like, what has your dad taught you along those lines, either directly or indirectly?
Yeah. So one thing, and I don't even necessarily want to. I remember when I was younger, I didn't want to remember this, but he just said it so often. But this idea of persistence, this concept, I should say, of persistence. But if you're working at something, to to maintain fortitude and to stay diligent in pursuing whatever that thing is. I think also he instilled respect of humans and people. I'm not. I don't mean to say humans in terms of like dealing with aliens and nothing like that, but just like I think when in the spaces that I'm in engineering, I really see often how people treat others like things, as if they don't have feelings, as if they don't have experiences that they can understand, as if you just tell someone something and they're supposed to respond like in a robotic manner. And so I think the way I saw my dad interact with people and communicate often helped me not necessarily know how to do this or how to do that, but just that's a person, that's a human being, like acknowledge them and to like trust that if you interact with them and you show them respect, they may or may not do the same, but they will appreciate that, right? So many times where like going to interviews and stuff like that, right? A lot of times people are like, oh, you're supposed to do it this way and that. I'm just like, I'm gonna just go and respect that human being and they respect, like we can talk, or trying to make, so I think through his communication style, and his frequency in communication. I mean, my dad and stepmom, they work in downtown Detroit. They work at an ice cream stand, and so on that corner, when you have festivals, not as frequent as they used to be. The festivals aren't in downtown Detroit, but when I was growing up, like they'd be there all day, various festivals and concerts. Like you talk with so many people. I mean, you see so many different folks coming on, across the street or whatever, asking, and they start off asking for ice cream, and then they end up talking about who knows what. But when you see people ask people, you can engage with folks across differences and perspectives, but you value human connection, right? You appreciate the way that us connecting through conversation energizes both of us. So those are some things I think.
So we were talking kind of before about Juneteenth and kind of what that means.
Yeah.
We had a Juneteenth Father's Day event in Chicago, and it was great. Like we had like a folk performance. We had games for the kids. We had things that related to Juneteenth. You know what I'm saying, to teach the children like what it really means. But my question to you, because it was Father's Day, so what's been the best Father's Day gift you ever received from your children so far?
Oh man, I feel bad. Dang. It's one of those father failures. I should remember this though. Huh? Man, I don't know. I'm not even gonna try to act like and make something up.
But they're 4 and 3, right?
I don't got nothing. Yeah,
Yeah.
4 and 2. They soon to be
They're
5 and 3.
4 and 2.
Yeah, 4 and 2. But yeah,
But
so it's mostly like mama doing stuff. But oh
so what
man,
about
I'm not. I
mama
think.
then? Was one of the best ones she gave you?
Well, I think it's also connected with them, but it was from her. But video. I think
Mm.
that she was, and I don't remember her exact words, but I remember one time she basically just walked through the ways that she sees me caring for each of the girls, and so I think that was deep to
Yeah,
me
that's
because it
cool.
showed that she sees my engagement.
Mm.
Um, I think a lot of times I'm like, man, I'm stumbling. Like, okay, I get that diaper, and I feel like for a week, all I might have did was just change diapers and pull ups. I ain't help cook, ain't help do hair, just did diapers. So I feel like, man, I'm not doing enough. But that particular video, I think, might have been 2 years ago. Um, it was when they were smaller. Really helped me feel good, invigorated me, and just like she basically like, I see you care for our girls. I'm not seeing you as this kind of physically present, emotionally absent, or whatever type of dad. She's like, I see what you're doing, and I appreciate it.
That's cool.
Without saying like you need to do more, or you know what I'm saying. Like it's cool, but I need you to step the game up, nothing like that. So,
Oh, that's dope, man. I guess my question is, what has like your relationship with your wife taught you about you, and what has your relationship with your daughters taught you about you?
yeah, that's deep. Um, Great question. For my wife, um, it definitely taught me that like I I'm not as patient, not as sensitive to these others as I thought. What I mean by that is, there's times where she won't tell me I messed up by saying something a certain way or doing something she asked me not to do or not doing something she asked me to do. But it's through her graciousness that when it clicks for me, I see what mercy really looks like. I see what kindness really looks
Mm,
like through her.
mm,
Um, and I become aware that I don't offer that same mercy, that same kindness and patience. I don't serve in the same way. I mean, she'll
mm.
do things out of her generosity, like presence is really big for her. Um, Small things like make sure you do cards on birthdays or various holidays, or just caring for people. And
Yeah.
so it's not through her saying that I'm not doing those things, but it's through her. I see at the level at which she does it that shows me that, oh, I thought I was doing good, but like this is what it really looks like to do that at a high level. Her humility, um, and just faithfulness. You know what I mean? And caring, being supportive. So that has really showed me um, that there is some tremendous room for improvement. One other thing she showed me is the 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 amount of time I spend thinking critically about how to live with purpose and like how to be true to my principles,
Hmm.
um, and the principles I want to lead this family with. And what I mean by that is there's times where she'll get annoyed because I'm reinforcing certain things or I'm asking certain questions again, being particular about certain things. Or she'll just say, like, I really appreciate, she'll hear about some of her friends' relationships. She's like, I'm so thankful that you do, or that you don't, da, 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 da. I'm so thankful, like, oh, I was annoyed when you kept asking me about this, or you wanted to do this, or you didn't want to, do X, Y, and Z. But now I see why that's important. Now I see that collegians, if you will, or consistency in trying to be a man of principle, why that matters. So that's about my relationship with my wife. With my kids, I reinforce that lack of patience issue. I mean, they through when they were, young, small, like younger than 2, yeah, it just took a lot of time for stuff like trying to go to sleep. Like, I mean, they really show you like you can be mad and try to get them to do something, but like kids gonna do what they gonna do.
Yeah.
And in those early stages, it's not even a defiance. It's just them figuring what they are. They're just being like, it's just natural with it reaction. So I realized the level of frustration that I would reach was nonsensical. It didn't make any sense. If I know that these kids are dependent on me and they're not explicitly doing certain things, I should be able to adapt, but I just didn't. So that showed me my lack of patience. But also, what they helped me see about me is my sensitivity and emotionality. So I'm a crier. Like, you start talking about deep stuff. I mean, multiple times in this talk, I'm just like, man, you guys talking about my dad. I'm just trying to hold back. Like, I had to bust out crying, yeah, very sensitive.
You gotta let it go, man. That's okay.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be able to talk. I just be, so we wouldn't have no interview because I'm gonna just boo-hoo. So, but I see that reflected in them, and like, I mean, just the smallest thing can shift their whole mood, in a negative or positive way. It can, the way I respond to them, they can be turned off, and their whole demeanor shifts, and they want to walk away. They don't want to interact with me. Or if I follow like my wife does, if they're irritated, frustrated, and I give them a hug, just like that, they're back engaged. And they can be frustrated, irritated, annoyed, and then they get a hug, and they're good to go. And so I think I see myself reflecting them a lot. But they've also showed me about myself in terms of just like they're very observant, and they're eager to like just soak in, not like books and stuff like that, asking questions. I mean, some of that is common for all children. I want to act like they're like baby geniuses. But I think that they showed me that some aspects of my interest in knowledge and knowing and figuring things out has been passed on through them, and the need to stay engaged with their ongoing development. Right? I mean, they can like books and those type of things, but if you give them something else, they'll be on to something else. If you give them, like, that's just how kids are. But they'll say like, okay, I'm trying to think. My daughter that's 4 is going to be 5. Like, she one day came home because when they like pre-kindergarten, sometimes folks are like, I want my kid reading by age 3. Someone like, I want them reading before they get into kindergarten, whatever the case may be. And so being in the field of education, I feel like there's all this pressure that my kids are supposed to be like top of the game and just genius. And I'm like, that wasn't me growing up, and I want them to learn for the enjoyment of learning, not trying to meet up to other people's standards.
Yeah.
So we were struggling, trying to figure out when to we started trying to work on reading and stuff like that. And so we tried it for a little bit, but my daughter wasn't really responsive. So we like, all right, we'll leave it alone. And then sometime later, I mean, I'm talking about months later, she came, she's like, I want to know how to read. I want to learn how to read. And we just like, oh, really? So we like, we looking at each other like, hey, big eyes, we excited. And then we, so I was like, all right, let me try. I got a little whiteboard, writing letters, I have a reading. Then we got these books. And she was like not feeling it. Right. It was like, you just said you want to learn how to read. And so what it showed me is like, one, she's still a child. I mean, they can communicate a lot of things, but it helped me see that I'm not thinking about her at times from a parental perspective. I have to know that like she's gonna say some things that she means, but she may not feel like doing the things that she just said. She
Yeah.
means it. It just means come back later. It means, try back later today, maybe try tomorrow. But I think sometimes I get so excited that, or I want to see something happen that I'm just like, let's do this right now, as opposed to like putting on the parent hat and saying like, as a 4-year-old human being and been out here for years, what she say and does often can appear inconsistent, but it's just really her growing and developing, right? And my 2-year-old, 1 minute she talking in these very sophisticated ways, and then the next minute she whining when we picked up in hell. Like I can't be like, why you ain't talking like you just was? Like, why don't you just ask me? I can't do that. That's not helpful. As a parent, I have to be the more mature one and say that there will be ebb and flows to how she, presents herself and how she's figuring herself out. And so they have taught me like it's one thing to be a parent, it's another thing to think like a parent, another thing to interact with them from a parental perspective, to give them space, to give them to support their agency and autonomy. Um, and then the last thing I'll say is they've taught me how hard it is to be a parent. Like you have to be so aware of what you're doing. Like you can't take anything for granted. I mean, you can anticipate failure. You have to grow comfortable with that, or just not. I don't want to say failure. Maybe not accomplishing things you want to see done, but you can't afford to to just not be aware, not be conscious in the present, because too much will set in. Too much that outside of those values and beliefs or your perspectives or what type of child you want to build. Too much, they'll end up all over the place. You just think things will be inevitable. And so it takes a lot of activity and engagement. One thing I'm thinking about in particular, my wife and I, we were reading this book, Parenting for Liberation. And the book talks about all these intentional decisions that we can make and how we parent. And I'm just like, whoa, like this, when I thought about having children, part of it I just assumed was going to be inevitable. Oh, you try this, you try that. And then they figured out and just like, no, really everything from the food they eat, how they dress, what they wear, how you talk to them, to where you go, what you allow them to watch or not watch, like everything is, is shaping them in some way. And the more intentional you are to whatever values you have, the more likely you have to, support the human being that you're trying to support.
So is that like liberation as a community, or like liberation from what aspect? Your liberation as a parent or something, or the
So it
child?
was particularly focused on like, wow, I guess the mother was black, but looking from a racial liberation standpoint, right? So
Okay.
getting out of norms of, as I said earlier, thinking about disciplines only punitive, physical punishment, norms of also like in community. So thinking about black spaces in a white society, there's not many black spaces. Like I live in Detroit, so I'm fortunate to be in a city where most of the people that I see and come across are black, but that's not common. But even amongst those black folks, again, dietary dynamics or spiritual values or practices or educational values may
Different.
not be the same. So liberation in the sense of not feeling as if you have to do everything, but connecting in community to establish the type of collective values and support mechanisms that you need and would like to have in your own wellness and raising children. It was some things in terms of actually forget what other type, but it goes like a number of chapters on different aspects of parenting that they suggest they get out of these like traditional kind of historical problematic norms that Black people often engage in, and people in general, but particularly talking about the Black community.
So me and Dr. Young have daughters, and we're at different stages. So I have a 4-year-old. He has a daughter in high school. So we're gonna go through these different phases. What type of advice would you give your daughter, as she grows up and matures and becomes like her own, self, her own woman. Like, what advice would you think you would give her on just life in general? It ain't got to be about dating or nothing like that, but like just some sage advice from a dad.
So different folks that we have our children around may say various things to our daughters and try to encourage them. But one person, and I actually can't remember what it is, but it's something I think to reinforce my daughters. They said, use your voice, speak up. And in the act, she was whining or crying or something like that. But they were, saying, use your voice, like go ahead, like, communicate what that you want to be heard. And so, if I think of one particular thing, I think in particular is to encourage my daughters to use their voice. It doesn't always necessarily mean speaking, whether that's through writing, but in the sense of being heard, that people know what you're thinking, people know that you're capable and interested in communicating your perspective, your thoughts, your experience, your ideas. That's one in particular, is finding ways to communicate. Like I think a lot of Black girls, I study, before I was in engineering, I was as an assistant professor in education, urban STEM education. And I saw all this information and data about how Black girls are disciplined, how Black girls are silenced in the classroom. And it's like, if we see girls excelling in certain ways, then we just take from what we see whatever we want to think of them as. So if they're doing well academically, then we assume that everything is okay. If they are dressing in a certain way that we find is socially unacceptable, then we assume that everything is not okay. If they are speaking in a certain way, if they communicate in a certain way, or their body language is a certain way, then we make assumptions about those things. Then rather than interacting with them, affirming their dignity, and allowing them to tell us what's going on with them, giving them space to communicate what's well and what's not well. So that's one thing for sure, is trying to help my girls communicate and find their voice, establish their voice, and whatever form or medium that means, and ensuring that they're heard. And part of another person I think of when I talk about that is Fannie Lou Hamer. This woman who was beat down, excluded, blackballed from her job, fired and things like that. And she made it her life's mission to articulate her experiences and the experience of those in her community. Not only her racial community, but like in her local community. Like, she used her voice in various ways. And, in many ways, she's still not as appreciated as much as I think she should be. But, that's someone who I think about, like, man, if I think about what my daughter to be, I want to be like Fannie Lou. Like, they tried to beat her down. Not they did beat her down, right? To silence her. They fired her and excluded her economically to silence her. And there are very other mechanisms too, but she like, this thing, that's all I got, is this piece right here, and y'all gonna hear me, as long as I'm able to use it. So
I know we're getting close to time, so I have one last question for you. But if you could think about like a question that you always wanted to answer to, what would it be?
Yeah, so with all of us having girls, one question that's always in my mind is like, how do men approach raising girls? Right? I think that when I first found out I was having a girl, one of my homeboys, he was like, "Oh man, you must have treated women terrible." I was like, "What?" It was the first time I heard it. He's like, "Yeah, man, men had girls, that mean that they weren't kind to the girls throughout their life." So that was interesting. But then the other reaction I get is, "You got a gun? Get your guns ready."
Yeah.
So it's like all these kind of, sometimes people are joking, sometimes people are serious with these ideas around, or another one is getting ready for puberty, right? For girls, and getting ready for their period and how to navigate. So, I'm like, I always tell my wife, like, if I had a boy, I know what things to kind of anticipate more explicitly that you'll navigate. I mean, you won't be everything that I went through, but there's some particular milestones, right? But for a young lady, for a girl, I'm just like, I've heard some. I mean, I don't, so that's always in my mind, people who raise girls are raising as a man, like, yeah, how do you approach that? Tips, suggestions, yeah.
I'll tell you my experience. I have a 4-year-old. She's a Cancer. That's just to give you scope. So I know other cancers, and they are very similar in the way that they have moods, like mood swings. One moment happy, next moment the world's ending. Ooh, it's like that in the instant. So I broke it down to like a science, like the different moods she would be in would be a different character. So it'd be uh, it was a dog when she was sad puppy. And she would walk around like a puppy, sad, barking, like a sad bark. And I'm like, oh, come here, sad puppy. Then I would show her love. Like in every character, I would show her love. It wasn't any character. The common denominator was love. But other characters would be more feisty, more I'm mad, like that type of thing. I'm angry. So I would literally cater to each mood. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't reprimand her. I wouldn't like say you wrong for doing this. I would, all right, which character are you? And then she would tell me. And I would say, okay, let's talk about it. You know what I'm saying? And then we would literally like act it out like role play. Like, and we still do it to this day. Like she's real feisty. She speaks her mind. Like she'll tell you, like, I'm not listening to you. Like she'll say that. I'm like, okay. Wow. I'm like, all right, then, you know what I'm saying? We're gonna have to talk about what that means. What does that mean? If you don't listen to me, these are your options. A or B. You know what I'm saying? So I think for me, to wrap it up, my experience with my daughter is she's a daddy's girl. Like daddy's girl. Like if it was daddy's girl in the dictionary, your daughter would probably be there too. But yeah, my daughter would be right next to her. Like, yep, I'm here too. Like she's really like on my lap. Like she's really attached to me, and I appreciate that. Like I really feel her love, and I want to multiply that like as much as I can. So
that's man. I used to be like, I don't even believe it. I don't know if daddy's girls is a real thing. That's how I used to think. I had my first, and then when the second one came through, I was like, yeah, this is a thing.
It's real.
The second one I would say is a clear difference in how she will seek me out, or when she sees me, the level of excitement than the older.
She reaching out to you like, hey.
Yeah. It's like some of it can account for. Okay, I did things differently. I was a little more engaged, but other of it's just like, yeah, this joker, like, there's a natural inclination there that you can't explain.
Yeah, for me, well, I have two daughters. One is 16, and the other is 9. And I have a son that's in the middle. He's 14. So I guess for me, man, like I do have a gun. So just so that part is true.
Find out. Find out.
What'd you say?
Say find out, nigga. Find
out. For me, like I tried to treat all of my children the same, but based on like their personalities, because all of them are different. But I guess I try to engage with them based on like their different personality traits, but still at the same time maintaining like fairness and treating them all the same. So I don't know if this helps, but that's just what I tried to do over the years, man.
Youngest is your daddy's little girl, Dr. Young. Who is yours? The oldest or the youngest? or both of them?
I don't know. I don't think like neither one of them are like I guess like in that mode, maybe my youngest daughter.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think she's necessarily like a daddy's little girl.
Hmm.
I think they both like me. They both like
You good then? You got that? You
Hey,
good?
that's all that matters. Man. You good?
yeah.
That's hard enough.
Yeah.
Let's see, at 16. Ooh.
Yeah,
But
man.
yeah,
Start with
yeah.
like, man. You gotta start with like. You know what I'm saying?
But they both love me. I'm gonna say that. Well, all three of my kids love me.
There you go.
So.
They like you too though. That's important. That's a
Yeah.
that's a good way that you
That's
said that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
They like you. My last thing, and this has been a great interview, man. I really appreciate you doing this, James. I asked you a question before we booked the call. What does fatherhood mean to you? And James, you said you had a good answer. You said embracing the privilege and responsibility of nurturing the brilliance of my children.
First thing, typically folks think of parenting as responsibility. Right? You brought this little joker into the world, and they ain't asked to be here. And so you have certain tasks and things to help them grow, make sure they're fed intellectually, spiritually, physically, nutrition, those type of things. But I also think it's a privilege in the sense that like it's ways in which they give back to me, like so much joy and excitement, like seeing their little laughs, seeing their resilience to have fun, and just their unawareness of certain things. I mean, I think it's a great reminder of what's most important. Like, man, there's a lot of craziness going on, but they out here just doing their own thing and they're having a great time. And it recenters me on the importance of the more important aspects of life. So I feel like it's a privilege to have these little humans that I'm investing into, but are also giving me feedback about myself. Like the question Dr. Young asked earlier about what have I learned about myself through them. Like a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't have the opportunity to receive the joy and laughter and the affirmation from them, as well as the challenges that they bring. So I truly see it as a privilege and responsibility. In the Bible, as a Christian Bible say, children are a blessing from the Lord. And so my first 2 years, I was like, I might have to. Like that scripture stuck out to me. I'm just like, Lord, I don't know, man. Like, I believe your word, but I feel more burden than blessing. And then, but when as I said earlier, once I adapted some things from in myself and better absorb the role of being a father and a parent, I could then see even better appreciate the blessing that they bring. But the other part when I talk about that brilliance is just like I truly believe that God has invested something wonderful in every human being that He allows to grace His earth, and in particular, so often Black folks, as I talked about earlier, we in this oppressive context, we're focusing on survival. We're focusing on counteracting the problematic structures that we have to navigate. But if you just focus on counteracting, you don't get to really get at the natural beauty that you have. You don't really get to nourish that because you're responding to this ugliness. And so I feel like it's my responsibility to help them to acknowledge what's working against them, but not center who they are and build it solely around that thing, because you never truly get your real potential. And so you have to build up the resilience to say, look, there are barriers, there are hurdles, there are unfortunate circumstances I'm gonna have to come across, but my totality is not simply to respond to those things. I have something greater and better that was invested in me that I want to bring to fruition. And so it's my job to not constrain that and or not try to make that into what I want it to be within them, but rather to create a space and a context where that they can pursue that and see that realized through themselves.
I know, like, we talk about like Hall of Fame interviews on here, and I would like to nominate this interview with James as a Hall of Famer.
I appreciate that, man.
I second the motion, man. I second that motion. Nah, man, it's a thing, man. But yeah, we definitely appreciate you, man, for your time and for your candor and for your story. Most of all, like you got a great story, man, and it's going to bear fruit. It's already done. It already bear fruit already. So keep doing what you're doing, bro. You're doing a good job, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, James, for joining us, man. This has been an awesome interview.
You're welcome, and thank you all for this opportunity, man. It is really cool that folks aren't just focusing on their own experience, but bringing others in to talk about the journey collectively and learn from them. So thank
Yeah.
y'all for what y'all doing and bringing me into it.
But yeah, so for myself, for Sir Royce Briales, for Dr. Raheem Young, and for James Holly Jr., thanks again for listening to WTF Interviews, and stay tuned for further announcements.